Hello and welcome. My name's Jerry Ludlow and this is my art channel where this week I'll be showing you how I paint an autumn landscape, painting it in watercolour. Now this is a classic landscape scene with a beautiful tree in the foreground. It's got lovely gold leaves and there's a tree to the left and one in the distance, and there's a lane, fence posts, grasses, and there'll be a blue sky, clear blue sky in the background. Here's my sketch from there. Now as you can see, it's not got much detail because it's not really necessary at this stage, and it gives me a feeling for the place, which is sometimes better than photographs. Now I transferred the sketch onto my watercolour paper, which is Arches 140 pounds rough, and I'm using a John Pike palette, which is a large plastic palette which I like to use, and the paints are Winsor & Newton artist grade paints. Now all of this information and more is in the description below, as is the video in chapters, so that you can go to the parts that you would find most helpful. That's if you're going to paint along with me. Now I'm going to start with the sky first. This is with Cobalt Blue and Raw Sienna. I'm wetting the paper so that the paper flows better, and the board is slightly tilted so the paper runs down. Just putting it on quickly, letting it do its own thing, run down the board, and then on the right hand side is where I'm putting the raw sienna, which a lot of it will be behind the tree, but it will just give it a bit of a glow behind the tree there. And then the bottom part of the sky, we'll just have a little bit of that raw sienna colour too, and then I'm going to be going down into the foreground as well, all very quick, just getting a first wash on. And on the bottom left there, putting some burnt sienna, slightly thicker paint there, but it's all going to be covered again. It's nice just to get some colour on the paper, lose that white that's staring you in the face before you start. I've drawn quite heavily here with the pencil, a little bit more than I normally do, so that you can see it. I haven't bothered with the leaves, just on the branches and a rough idea of the trees in the far distance. And also I'm drying it off as we go, so I'm stopping it and then carrying on again. As you can see, it's dried quite a bit lighter, and the idea is to get one of those looking like one of those cold autumn days where the sun's out but still quite cold. And I'm using some of the cobalt blue mixture that was there with Payne's grey, and putting in the distant trees with this colour. Just doing some abstract shapes in the background there, trying not to get them to look too uniform, and they will dry out lighter as well. And I'm using raw umber and some burnt sienna, get a nice dark colour. I'm going to start working on this trunk of the tree on the left hand side. I'm going to be giving it a few washes, so just looking to cover everything up with this first wash, leaving the smaller branches. when you apply the paint, try to just go over each area once. Try not to fill too much. It doesn't matter quite so much with this first wash, but try and avoid those brush marks that look like you've spent a lot of time working on it. I think it makes the painting look more energetic when you paint it quite fast. Just doing what I can before I dry it again. Painting is going to take about 30 minutes. Using a ready-made green, sap green, with some cerulean blue. For the distant tree. And with this, putting the blue in there, it will make it look a little bit further back, even though it's green. It's green going on the side of blue. And things in the distance, like the distant trees that you can see there, have a grey, bluey tint. Putting this tree in, leaving lots of holes. That's where the birds fly through. Always appreciated if you can subscribe. Helps me to make more of these videos. And just doing the distant bushes in mostly cerulean blue. And just touching into the green, being mindful not to fill in too many of the holes. And it's going to put in a small tree at the back, which is predominantly blue, cerulean blue. You can see the painting's taking shape quite quickly. This is raw sienna and some cadmium yellow, which is quite, the cadmium yellow I've got is quite dirty because I've been using it with other paints for other paintings. Lots of gold in this painting. Real feeling of autumn. This is probably the best time of the year for painting outside. The colours. Sometimes a bit overwhelming, really. There's just so many colours. Just going over with some neat burnt sienna. And that's going to be the shadow that's cast across the track. If you start to use the paint thicker, it will not spread so much when you put it on top of the wet paint underneath. and putting in an area of the field on the left there in that same burnt sienna colour. Not fussing too much, and just varying it with some of the colours in the pools of paint on the palette. That's why I like using this palette, because you can just have a look on what's on there and just use some of that sometime when you're looking for kind of random colours. As you can see, just making quick decisions on the colours here. I will be going over it again, just trying to get some nice lights against dark and the darks against the light. This is the distant fields done very quickly, and bringing those brush strokes towards the front of the painting give a feeling of the track going from the foreground into the distance. This is just a medium synthetic brush, putting a bit of colour on there, which is going to be an impression of the foliage, trees and things like that. This is the first wash, just really using the colours that was on the palette there. Burnt sienna, raw umber, cerulean blue, and just adding some green to this. Trying to get a variety of colours. Sometimes it's difficult to paint what's in front of you exactly, because it's just too overwhelming. There's just too many colours, and unless you start trying to paint every leaf, which is not something I like to do. I like to just give an overall impression of the colours, the lights and the darks, of the golds and the yellows and the greens. This is the second wash going on to the trunk, raw umber, raw sienna, and just a little neutral tint. And start getting this nice and dark, so really start bringing it forward. So you can see I'm only going so far with the branches. I'll be doing the tips of the branches just in one go with a rigger brush near the end of the painting. Just going over what I'd already done, just leaving some light areas here and there on that tree trunk, letting some of the first wash show through, not wanting it just to look like a block of colour. Now this is a palette knife with a sharp edge, and I'm just putting in some of the grasses with it. You have to leave it a little while before you do this, and I will be going over this again, so I'll do it again, and some of this will sink back. It's quite effective, very quick way of doing light grasses. Just letting that dry a bit and then going again. As you can see, I've missed out a lot of the trees in this particular painting, and just concentrating on having 3 trees as the main focus. There's a larger tree, a medium-sized tree, and a small tree, which seems to work, and it's the same with things like rocks and stuff like that. Large, medium and small. Just working on this tree and going in with some darker colours. As you can see, just using a mixture of the colours there and adding to the palette with some cerulean blue, which is quite a transparent blue. Leaving lots of areas clear in the background. Trying not to make it look like a lollipop, the tree. And now the grasses in the front there. Using some real dark paint, Payne's grey, sepia, a little neutral tint, all the dark colours. And I'm going to be just blending in the edges of the paint on the right hand side there, and adding some other colours, all nice and dark. Burnt sienna, give this impression of kind of in the dark, in the shadows, in the foreground, maybe the clouds or trees to the right hand side that you can't see. Just using inexpensive brushes on this painting. They're just synthetic. And I'm going again with the palette knife, putting in some of those grasses. Trying to be mindful not to do too many. You can overdo this sort of thing. Yeah, try not to get too carried away. Just do a few. Mixing up some of this real dark mixture again with this rigger brush, which is a brush with a very fine point. This particular one holds quite a lot of paint. It's got a thick body on it and then goes to a fine point, and then doing the top of the grasses. Very quick strokes. Try and just do these with confident quick strokes. Don't make too much of them. Kind of a flick. Same thing over on the right hand side. Payne's grey, sepia, neutral tint. All of my very dark colours. I do try and vary it a little bit so it doesn't look too black, like a big black plain area. And they stand out really well with this very light background with the gold colour. And for the third time now, going over this tree, making it stand out even more now. Looking really very much so in the foreground. Switching from a small synthetic to the rigger brush. Doing as much as I can with a synthetic brush, but it gets to the part where it you can only do so much on the branch, and it's too thick. You need to move to the rigger. I'm still working on this some of the foreground, putting these fences in. The fences are actually in relatively good condition, but as an artist we always make them look like they're half falling down. Just using a regular rigger brush now, which is just a small brush with a very fine point, and see how I'm rolling it in the paint there, just to get it all full of paint when you bring it across. It's very easy not to put enough paint on these rigger brushes, and you kind of run out mid branch. Whereas if you load it up, you should be able to do quite long branches with this. Just using my guide branches that were done with the sketch initially, and I will be adding some of my own freehand after a while. Good fun doing these. Can be addictive. Be careful you don't do too many. This is mostly neutral tint now. Very dark. Just putting the branches in at the back of this tree at the front there, the foliage of it. Lots of branches showing here as the tree's lost most of its leaves. Hasn't quite lost all those on the top there yet, they're just turning a gold colour. Putting some darks in this tree that's to the left in the distance, using the neutral tint with some blue in it, cerulean blue. Just doing the impression of branches in between the leaves that I put in earlier, and darkening some of it up. Being mindful not to cover everything up with the dark colour in the distance. Leave some of those areas that are clear of paint. Sky holes, I think they're called. And into the foreground with an old mop brush, using burnt sienna and some of the mixture in the palette. Now I'm going to be doing using what they call spatter, which is when you hit the brush, which is fully loaded with paint, onto, well, I use a palette knife, and when you get it watery enough, just try to see how it goes. Now that's not watery enough, and I've covered up the areas that I don't want it to go onto, and this will give the impression of some leaves. It can be done very quickly, very effectively. There we go. Just have to work on the consistency just to get enough, and that looks like a few loose leaves. Much better than trying to paint it individually. And bringing these top branches out to meet some of those spots that I put in there. As you can see, it was really effective. It's another one of those things that you have to be mindful not to get too carried away and put too many. And there we go. Removing this masking tape. Just regular masking tape, regular household masking tape. And it's not been on the paper very long, so it comes off quite easily and doesn't rip the edge, and it leaves you with a nice edge for your painting. And there we are. Suffolk landscape. Quite a successful painting, I think. Hope you enjoyed painting, or you will enjoy painting it, or you painted along with me. See you next time.